The night the Alpha Vampire King knocked on my door, the mountain was trying to kill us both. Wind howled around the cottage like a living thing, raking icy claws over the roof, flinging snow against the windows until the glass shuddered in its frame. Up here on the high ridge, far above the last crooked street of the village, storms came with teeth. That was why I'd chosen it. Wolves, blizzards, and silence were easier company than people. Reina Petrescu, which, rumored Omega, alleged curse on the valley. I wore every title like another layer of winter clothing. Useful. Protective. Easy to take off when no one was looking. I moved through my one-room cottage on practice paths, feeding the fire, checking the iron kettle, counting jars of herbs and tinctures. The familiar ritual steadied me. Outside, the world was all white and black. Inside, it was amber fire, old wood, and the sharp green scent of drying plants. 6 years ago I had run from torches and accusations. Now the only flames that ever touched me were the ones I lit myself. The storm roared, but underneath it the forest felt wrong. Too quiet. No owl calls. No distant crack of shifting branches. Just a long, endless inhale of something waiting. I had just finished labeling a jar of wolfbane when it came, one heavy knock on the door. Not the timid tap of a lost hiker. Not the hurried pounding of a panicked villager. A single, deliberate strike that echoed through the cottage like a challenge. I froze, ink pen still in my hand. No one came this high in weather like this. The nearest human soul lived kilometers away. The village below avoided the witch's path, even in summer. If someone had reached my door tonight, they were either desperate, very dangerous, or both. Another knock. Closer to a blow this time. Is anyone there? A man's voice strained, muffled by the storm. Please! I need shelter. My fingers slid toward the iron poker by the hearth. My grandmother's warning whispered through my head, monsters both knock and creep, child. Don't trust the quiet ones more than the loud. Against my better judgment, I stepped toward the door. If you're enjoying this story so far, subscribe for more stories like these and comment where you're watching from. It helps more people find our little pack in the dark. Who are you? I called. Lucian, he said after a pause. Lucian is straight. My car went off the road. I've been walking for hours. I don't think I can make it much farther. Car accidents happened on these mountain roads. So did ambushes. So did old magic. I hesitated only one more heartbeat, then pulled the bolt and opened the door a crack. The storm shoved cold air and snow in around him, but I barely felt it. All I saw was the man on my threshold. A tall, broad-shouldered stranger pressed against the frame to stay upright, dark hair crusted with snow, coat torn and soaked with blood. His left leg was bent at a wrong angle, and a deep gash stained his side. And his eyes. Pale, metallic silver. Not human silver. Not village gray. The kind of silver you only ever heard about in stories told very quietly, very far from any open window. You're hurt, I said, because it was easier than saying you're not human. He smiled faintly, and for a second I saw the predator under the pain. Very observant, he rasped. May I come in, Omega? The last word slid over my skin like cold fingers. No villager would have called me that. Only someone who knew the old laws of packs and courts would. A smarter woman would have slammed the door. Instead, I stepped back. Come in, I said. But understand something, Lucian, if you lie to me, I know how to make kings bleed. His gaze flickered, sharp and startled, and in that moment I knew two things. He was not what he claimed. And whatever he was running from was about to crash into the quiet, frozen life I'd built for myself on this mountain. The heat from the hearth hit him first, bringing color back to his too pale face. Reina shut the door quickly, sealing out the storm, and gestured toward the chair closest to the fire. Sit before you fall, she ordered. Lucian obeyed with a soft grunt, lowering himself into the chair as if the act cost him more energy than he cared to admit. Up close, Reina could see the damage clearer. His left leg twisted wrong beneath the torn fabric of his trousers, his side soaked with blood, the dark coat cut cleanly through as though by steel, not stone or branches. "You are no simple tourist," she muttered, grabbing scissors and her battered medical kit from a shelf. "Hold still." "Do you often rescue strangers on your mountain?" he asked, voice low, threaded with a humor that didn't quite hide the pain. "I often mind my own business," Raina replied. "Tonight appears to be the exception." She cut his coat open and hissed under her breath. The wound at his side was deep, a gash that should have bled him near dry. Yet the flow had already slowed, as if his body were stitching itself together beneath her hands. His skin was cold under her fingers. Not the chill of the storm, but something deeper, like stone that had never seen the sun. Raina swallowed. Legends whispered in the village wells rose unbidden in her mind. Silver-eyed hunters who walked the night. A blood king in a fortress of black stone, ruling over courts of shadows and wolves. Elder vampires who called themselves alphas, who claimed omegas with a bite and a vow. "Car accident, you said?" she asked, cleaning the wound anyway. Lucian watched her with those unsettling eyes. "Technically, yes. The road and I had a disagreement. Bullets and politics were involved before that." "Bullets?" Raina glanced at the edges of the wound, at the bruising on his ribs, at the way he carried himself like someone used to command, not fear. "You don't talk like a villager," she said. "Or a tourist. And you don't move like someone afraid of old stories," he countered. "You smell like mountain herbs and old bloodlines, Raina Petrescu. Like someone who should have been claimed by a pack or a court long ago." She went still. "How do you know my name?" He tilted his head, gaze drifting briefly to the shelves crowded with jars and worn books. "The village speaks of the witch who lives with the pines. The one who refused the Alpha King when he came recruiting healers years ago." His lips curved faintly. "They left out that you're beautiful when you're angry." Raina's stomach dropped. She hadn't heard anyone speak of that visit in years. The night a masked emissary from the Vampire King's court had come to her family, offering protection in exchange for service. Her mother had refused, and the years that followed had ended in flames and fear. "If you're here on his behalf," she warned, needle poised over his skin, "you can turn around and crawl back into the snow. King or Alpha or Vampire, none of them own me." Lucian's jaw flexed as she pushed the needle through his flesh. He didn't flinch. "I'm not here for him," he said softly. "I am trying very hard to stay alive despite him." Raina tied off the first stitch, fighting the urge to look into his eyes again. She didn't want to see her reflection in that strange silver. "Then sleep," she said. "The storm will bury the road by dawn. Whatever court or pack you're running from won't find you here easily." As she worked, the blizzard howled around them, and Raina tried to ignore the feeling in her chest. The sense that by opening her door tonight, she hadn't just sheltered a stranger. She had invited the shadows of a king into her solitary kingdom. By morning, the world outside had vanished beneath a thick white shroud. Snow climbed almost to the windowsills, and the narrow path Raina used to reach the lower trails was gone as if it had never existed. The storm had sealed them in. Raina stood at the small window, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug, watching the pale winter light creep across the drifts. Behind her, she could hear Lucian's breathing, too steady, too calm for someone who'd nearly bled out on her floor. "Healing quickly," she muttered. "Of course you are. You say that like it's an accusation." His voice came, roughened by sleep. She turned. He lay on her narrow bed, the one concession to comfort she'd allowed herself in this life. She'd taken the old rocking chair by the hearth for the night, muscles knotting from half-sleep. Now, as she crossed the room to check his bandages, she noted what had changed. The bruising on his ribs had faded to a faint shadow, the wound at his side already knitting at the edges. No human healed like that. "What are you?" she asked quietly. Lucian's mouth quirked. "You already know. A normal person would deny it," she said. "A smart monster would lie. You're doing neither. I'm tired of lying, he admitted. Tired of running from hunters and assassins and other alphas who think the throne belongs to them. There it was, the word that made the air feel thinner. Alphas, Raina repeated. Thrones. Kings. You're not just some rogue vampire, are you? He watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. In the cities, they call me the Night Court's Alpha King, he said at last. Lucian Valek. First of my bloodline. Ruler of the Northern Courts. To you, I'm just a man who will be very embarrassed if you make me explain that while I'm half naked and bleeding in your bed. Raina stared at him, then let out a short, disbelieving laugh. The Alpha Vampire King is in my cottage. Fantastic. I definitely haven't made terrible life choices. You didn't invite me, Lucian said. You opened the door for a dying man. That's different. She began to unwrap the bandage at his side, forcing her hands to remain steady. Kings don't usually travel alone, she said. Where are your guards, your court, your, whatever you blood drinkers call your pack? His jaw tightened. For a moment, the easy humor drained away, leaving something older and colder. Dead, he answered simply. Or scattered. There was a coup brewing for months. I thought I was staying ahead of it. I was wrong. Someone inside my own court fed information to hunters and rival elders. They ambushed us on the pass. He glanced toward the window. This storm saved me as much as it trapped me. Raina tied off the fresh bandage and stepped back. So you've brought your war into my home? Yes, he said, with the brutal honesty she was beginning to recognize as his version of respect. But I didn't intend to. I was trying to reach an old safe house lower in the valley. Your cottage was not part of the plan. Raina's gaze drifted over her shelves, the old photographs, the carved wooden wolf her mother had left her. She'd built a quiet life here precisely to avoid being dragged back into the worlds of alphas and courts. Yet here they were, sitting in her bed and bleeding on her sheets. You should know, Lucian added, that by sheltering me, you may have put yourself in the path of hunters who don't care who they cut down to get to a king. She met his eyes, anger and something fiercer sparking in her chest. You should know, she replied, that I've already lost everything once to fear and torches. I'm not the same frightened girl who ran to these mountains as an exile Omega. His expression shifted at that word, Omega, the title she'd never let anyone use for her. Whoever comes, Raina said, voice steady, this is my territory. My hearth. My rules. Alpha King or not, you're under my protection now. Lucian stared at her for a long moment, then inclined his head in a gesture that felt almost ceremonial. Then by old law, he murmured, I accept the shelter of your den, Omega Witch. And I swear, on crown and blood, that anyone who tries to burn it out from around us will learn exactly how dangerous a cornered king can be. The days that followed fell into an uneasy rhythm. Snow kept them trapped, the path buried deep beneath drifts that would swallow even a vampire's stride. Raina spent mornings grinding herbs, checking stores, pretending her hands weren't shaking when she lit the fire. Afternoons, she changed Lucian's bandages and pretended not to notice how his wounds closed faster than any medicine could explain. By the third day, the gash at his side had faded to an angry pink line. The broken leg still troubled him, but he moved around the cottage more each hour, leaning on a carved stick he'd shaped from a fallen branch she'd brought in for kindling. You're healing too fast, she said, watching him test his weight gingerly. He raised a brow. Is that a complaint? It's an observation, she replied. If I'd known kings were such hardy creatures, I'd have charged more when I stitched you. He smiled, but his gaze drifted to the window, where the snow had stopped falling and the sky had taken on the steel-gray color that meant another storm was waiting beyond the horizon. You feel it too, he said quietly. Raina did. A pressure in the air that wasn't weather. The forest seemed to be holding its breath. The pines whispered differently, their branches creaking in a rhythm that reminded her of boots in snow. Hunters? She asked. Maybe, he said. Or wolves. There are packs in these mountains that answer to no court. They smell weakness. Blood. Fear. Well, they won't find fear here, Reyna said. Annoyance, perhaps. Irritation. A deep, abiding regret that I didn't barricade my door that first night. But not fear. Lucian chuckled, then winced, pressing a hand briefly to his ribs. His fingers brushed the mark beneath his shirt. A rune burned into his skin, the sign of the crown he wore. Reyna had glimpsed it once when changing his bandages, a sigil shaped like a crescent fang over a full moon. Tell me about them, she said. Your court. You said you wanted nothing to do with kings. I also said I like to know which monsters are knocking on my door, she replied. Consider it professional curiosity. Lucian leaned back in the chair, eyes distant. The night court stretches from these mountains to the western cities, he began. Alpha lions, elders, fledglings, wolves, witches bound to old packs. I inherited a fractured throne, too many factions, not enough loyalty. I thought I could hold them together, make something better than the blood feuds and shadow wars. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Ambition breeds envy. Envy breeds betrayal. You know how the story goes. Reyna did. Different kingdoms, same lessons. And what about Omegas? She asked softly. His gaze snapped back to her. Why that word troubles you? She shrugged, pretending her heart hadn't stuttered. Because in the stories, Omegas are collars, not crowns. Pretty things alphas claim and keep in gilded cages. Healers. Seers. Blood-psalm witches who never get to choose their own path. Lucian's eyes darkened. Those stories are written by alphas who fear what Omegas become when they realize their own power. In my court, an Omega's word can outweigh a general's. In your court, she echoed. Not in mine. You have no court, he reminded her gently. You have a cottage, some jars, and a very stubborn heart. I have my freedom, she said. That's more valuable than any pact bond or king's favor. The words hung between them, fragile and fierce. Outside, a branch snapped loudly in the forest. Lucian's head snapped toward the sound, all humor vanishing from his face. Reyna felt it too now, the wrongness in the air sharpening, focusing. We're not alone, he said. Reyna discovered the footprints while fetching firewood from the sheltered stack behind the cottage. 3 sets, pressed deep into the snow that had fallen after the first storm, circling the house in a slow, deliberate pattern. They were too large, too heavy to be villagers. Whoever had come had stopped at each window, their weight shifting, bodies leaning close to peer inside. Her breath fogged in the cold air as she traced the tracks with her eyes. The snow had begun again, soft flakes drifting down, but not enough to hide the story written at her doorstep. They had been watched in the night. She hurried inside, bolting the door behind her. Lucian was already standing, weight braced on his makeshift cane, eyes sharp. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said. Not a ghost, Reyna replied, grabbing the old hunting rifle from the high shelf above the hearth. Ghosts don't leave boot prints. His gaze flicked to the weapon, then back to her face. Show me. Together they moved from window to window, Reyna describing what she'd seen. At the back of the cottage, overlooking the narrow path that disappeared into the trees, Lucian's expression hardened. 3, he murmured. Not villagers. Not pack either. Their stride is wrong. Hunters. Or worse. Elders enforcers. They've confirmed I'm here. They'll return at dusk with more. Reyna's grip tightened on the rifle. How many more? Enough to kill a king and raise a witch's cottage, he said bluntly. They won't risk me slipping away again. So we're bait in a snowdrift, she said. Wonderful. Lucian looked at her with something like regret. Reyna, I didn't just crash near your home by accident. I was trying to reach an old refuge in the valley. But when I scented your herbs on the wind, your family's bloodline on the air, He exhaled. I chose your door. I hoped the old magic here would hide me. I was wrong. Her chest tightened. So you knew what you were dragging to my doorstep. I knew what might be following me, he said quietly. I didn't know they'd move this fast. Or that you would open the door. The confession stung, even more because he didn't hide behind excuses. Raina turned away, staring at the fire until the flames blurred. Can you still walk? She asked at last. Yes. Not quickly. Then we have two choices, she said. Run and hope the storm covers our tracks, or stay and remind whoever they are that a witch's den is not easy prey, Alpha King or no. Lucian's lips curved in a grim smile. You talk like a general. I talk like someone who has had her life burn out from under her once already, Raina said. I won't run again. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then we hold, he said. We make this cottage a fortress. You know the land, I know the way hunters think. Together, Omega, we might survive. I am not your Omega, she snapped, but the corner of her mouth twitched despite herself. For now, he murmured under his breath. Raina pretended she hadn't heard. They worked in a blur of motion, the quiet intimacy of previous days replaced by sharp focus. Raina showed Lucian the old root cellar beneath her workshop, the narrow tunnel her grandmother had dug generations ago as a last resort escape route. It leads to the stream, she said, lantern light flickering on stone walls. 50 meters, maybe 60. It's cramped. Half frozen this time of year. It's a way out if the cottage goes up, Lucian said, running his fingers along the cold stone. We'll keep it as a last resort. Better to make them believe we have nowhere to go. Back in the main room, they overturned the heavy oak table to create a barricade facing the door. Raina checked the rifle, hands steady now, and laid out the few silver-tipped bullets her grandfather had left, heirlooms from a time when wolves still stalked the lower pastures. Lucian's eyes flicked to the bullets. You kept these. I keep many things, she said. Relics. Warnings. Choices. Silver burns even us, he said. Use it wisely. She glanced at his healing side. Good motivation not to get between me and the door, then. As the pale daylight thinned toward dusk, the forest grew unnaturally still. Even the crows were silent. Raina could feel the approach of strangers like a pressure behind her eyes. Old magic stirred in her blood, the Petresca line of healers and seers reacting to the presence of death. When this is over, Lucian said quietly, settling behind the barricade with the ease of someone who built many such defenses, you'll have decisions to make. The Night Court doesn't forget those who shelter its king, or those who try to kill him. I'll worry about my future after we survive my present, Raina said. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a heartbeat the title of Alpha King seemed to fall away. He was just a man facing the possibility of his last night, sharing it with a woman who had every reason to hate him and yet still chose to stand at his side. You should know, he said, voice low, that if it comes to it, I'll draw them away from you. They want my head, not yours. And you should know, she replied, that if you try to go outside and die dramatically in the snow, I will shoot you myself and tell your council it was an accident. His laugh was soft, incredulous. You are the most infuriating Omega I've ever met. Good, Raina said. Keeps kings on their toes. The first voice came just as the last light drained from the sky, a shout from the tree line, too loud, too theatrical to be anything but deliberate. Lucian Volek! A man called, his accent more city than mountain. We know you're in there. Come out and kneel, and we'll make it quick for your little witch. Raina felt Lucian go very still beside her. Elias, he said. My former lieutenant. The one who opened the gates. Does he know you're the one who fed him to the storm instead of the Elder Council? She asked. Not yet, Lucian murmured. But he will when I put him in the ground. Another voice joined the first, higher, mocking. We'll burn you out if we must, Alpha King. Courts change. Omega toys can be replaced. Reyna's vision narrowed. The rifle felt hot under her hands. Lucian, she said very calmly, if they call me a toy again, I'd like permission to shoot first. Permission, she realized as soon as she said it, that she did not actually need. Lucian's silver eyes met hers. The bond between them was still just circumstance and shared danger, but in that look, something older and wilder sparked, two predators agreeing on the shape of justice. By crown and blood, he said, voice like iron. I grant it. Outside, boots crunched closer in the snow. Inside, in the small cottage that had once been her sanctuary, Reyna Petrescu raised her rifle and prepared to show hunters what happened when they cornered a witch and an alpha vampire king together. Last chance, Valek! Elias shouted. Come out and kneel, or we light the witch's nest and watch you both burn. Reyna's pulse steadied instead of racing. Threats used to send her running, shrinking, hiding in shadows. Tonight something else rose inside her. A hard, tempered fury that felt very much like an alpha's spine threaded through an omega's heart. Lucian nudged the barrel of the rifle a fraction lower. Window frame, he murmured. Aim for the gap, left of that pine. He always stands there when he thinks he's untouchable. You sound almost fond of him, she muttered. I'm fond of predictable enemies, he replied. Outside, snow crunched again. A figure stepped into Reyna's limited view. Tall, wrapped in a dark coat, partially hidden by the warped wood of the shutters. She exhaled slowly, just as her father had taught her years ago, before fear had driven their family out of the village's hunting circles. Reyna squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked into her shoulder, a thunderous crack shattering the tense silence. The figure jerked, spun, and went down hard into the snow. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then chaos erupted. Shouts. Another gunshot, this one slamming into the cottage wall above their barricade, showering them in splinters. Lucian grabbed her arm and pulled her lower behind the overturned table as more bullets punched through the rough-hewn boards. You hit him, he said. Shoulder, not heart, but he'll remember you for it. Good, Reyna said, teeth bared. I hate being forgettable. They crawled to the next window, glass already spiderwebbed with cracks. Lucian risked a quick glance, then hissed. 4 of them now, he said. Elias. 2 human hunters. 1 elderborn. I can smell the old blood from here. Elderborn? Reyna asked. Stronger. Faster. Harder to kill, he explained. They don't like the cold, though. The Alpha Kings before me pushed them south. They're not used to these mountains. Well, they picked the wrong ridge to storm, she muttered. Reyna, he said quietly, if they get inside, you go straight to the cellar. Don't argue. If they get inside, she shot back, I'm not leaving you to die on my floor. I just scrubbed those planks last week. He huffed out a breath that might have been a laugh, but his eyes changed, silver deepening, pupils thinning to sharp slits. In the dim light of the cottage, she saw his fangs lengthen behind his lips, watched the Alpha Vampire Kings step forward out of the wounded man's shell. Then stay low, he said. And when I tell you to run, Omega, run. Another shot slammed into the door, blowing the latch apart. The heavy wood shuddered on its hinges. I think they're done talking, Reyna said. Then we answer in a language hunters understand, Lucian replied, and for the first time since he'd arrived, she saw him as the night court must, ruthless, beautiful, terrifying. The next shot splintered the bar across the door. This time, Reyna did not flinch. The door went down on the 4th impact, wood exploding inward in a blast of snow and shards. Reyna's world narrowed to sound and motion, the howl of the wind, boots pounding on her floorboards, Lucian moving with deadly grace beside her. 3 men burst through first, one with Reyna's bullet in his shoulder, staggering but furious, another with a shotgun, the third with eyes too pale and ancient to belong to any human. Stay down, Lucian snarled, and then he was gone, nothing but a blur of dark coat and silver eyes. The Elderborn moved unnaturally fast, knife flashing as he lunged. Lucian met him head-on, their clash sending a spray of embers from the hearth. Fangs bared, his hand closed around the elder's wrist with bone-crushing force. Reyna heard the snap. Gunfire roared. The hunter with the shotgun fired blindly toward the barricade. What exploded inches from Reyna's head. Instinct took over, she rolled left, came up on one knee, and fired the rifle again. The shot caught the man's leg. He screamed and went down in a spill of blood and curses. Witch! He spat. Omega bitch! Reyna's vision went cold. She dropped the rifle, it was empty anyway, and snatched the iron poker from beside the hearth. The hunter was reaching for a handgun when she brought the poker down on his wrist. Bone crunched. He howled. I told you, she said, voice shaking but hard. I'm not anyone's toy. Behind her, Lucian and the Elderborn crashed into the table, splintering the makeshift barricade. For a heartbeat she saw the full terrifying reality of what he was. Eyes glowing like frozen moons, shadows crawling across his skin like smoke, fangs sunk into the Elder's throat. Old, dark blood sprayed across the floorboards, hissing where it touched the fire. The Elder convulsed, then went still. Lucian let him drop, chest heaving. Two down, he rasped. Where's Elias? As if summoned, a shot punched through the window, grazing Lucian's shoulder. He staggered, swore. Reyna whirled in time to see a figure at the broken threshold. Elias, pale hair damp with snow, eyes fever-bright with ambition. Well, he said, raising his gun again. The great Alpha King and his mountain Omega. Charming! Reyna stepped in front of Lucian before she could think better of it. The hunter she'd disarmed struggled on the floor behind her, groping for his dropped weapon. Move, witch, Elias said. This isn't your fight. Wrong, Reyna said. You brought it to my door. That makes it very much my fight. Elias smiled, slow and cruel. You aren't bonded to him, he said. I can smell it. Walk away now, and I'll let you run. The king falls either way. The court will need clever Omegas to patch its wounds. Lucian's hand closed around her elbow, fingers tight. Don't listen to him. Tempting offer, Reyna said, forcing her voice to stay level. But I've already been someone's scapegoat. I'm not interested in becoming your pet either. Her heel found the hunter's dropped knife behind her. In one motion, she kicked it up, caught it midair, and threw, aiming not for Elias's heart, but his hand. The blade sank into his wrist. His gun clattered to the floor. Lucian moved. In the space of a heartbeat, he crossed the gap between them. He hit Elias like a storm, driving him back into the snow-clogged doorway. They crashed outside in a tangle of limbs, snarls, and curses, rolling into the drift. Reyna seized the fallen shotgun with shaking hands. The injured hunter on her floor made one last desperate grab for her ankle. She kicked him in the face and ran for the door, every instinct screaming at her to get Lucian back inside before more shots came from the trees. Instead, she emerged into silence. Lucian had Elias pinned in the snow, one hand wrapped around his throat. The traitor's eyes bulged, breath forming frantic clouds in the freezing air. Blood from his wrist and Reyna's earlier shot mixed with the white around them. You wanted my throne, Lucian said, voice flat. You wanted my court. You thought killing an Alpha King in a witch's cottage would make you a legend. Elias choked out a broken laugh. They already whisper your court is weak. He spat. That you hide behind Omegas and old treaties. No one fears you anymore, Valak. Lucian's grip tightened. You're right about one thing, he said. The court needs a legend. Reyna saw the decision harden in him. The part of her that had once patched up hunters and village boys wanted to say stop. The part of her that had watched her parents' clinic burn stayed very, very quiet. This isn't just vengeance, Lucian murmured, more to her than to Elias. It's warning. To everyone who thinks kings can be toppled like loose stones. He snapped Elias's neck as easily as breaking a twig. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then, somewhere deeper in the forest, another voice shouted, a distant call, answering no one. Shadows moved between the pines, then retreated. His back up, Lucian said, letting the bodies slump into the snow. They'll see their alpha fall and think twice. Reyna swallowed hard, fingers digging into the shotgun's cold metal. Are we safe? No, he said honestly. But we're alive. That's a start. Behind them, smoke began to curl out of the shattered windows. Reyna turned and saw a burning branch lodged in the thatched eaves, embers already licking greedily at the dry wood. My cottage, she whispered. The flames leapt higher, hungry and bright. Reyna. Lucian's voice softened. We have to move. The fire spread faster than she'd ever imagined. Dry beams and old books made eager kindling, feeding the blaze until the entire roof glowed orange against the bruised evening sky. Heat rolled over Reyna's face as she stumbled backward, eyes burning, not just from smoke. Everything, she said hoarsely. My grandmother's journals. My notes. The seeds. Lucian gripped her shoulders, turning her away. You can mourn when we're not standing inside a beacon, he said. Hunters aren't the only things drawn to fire. Elders. Wolves. Curious villagers. We need to disappear before anyone else comes looking for the king who survived. The tunnel, she said, latching onto the one practical thought she had left. The root cellar. If the roof collapses, it'll crush the entrance. Then we go now. His voice brooked no argument. Back inside, the heat was worse, smoke churning along the ceiling in dark waves. The bodies on her floor were already half obscured by ash and drifting embers. Reyna coughed, eyes streaming, and led the way to the workshop, where the trapdoor to the cellar lay hidden beneath a threadbare rug. Lucian's limp was worse now, the exertion and fresh wounds dragging him down. Reyna hammered her shoulder against his hip, practically shoving him toward the opening. Down, she ordered. You first. You're heavier. If the tunnel's unstable, better it collapses after the king than before the witch. Your logic is questionable, he muttered, but he obeyed, lowering himself gingerly down the narrow steps. Smoke poured after them, chasing them into the earth. The air in the cellar was damp and musty, but blessedly cool. Reyna snatched up the lantern she kept there for emergencies, grateful her grandmother's paranoia had included spare oil and flint. Pale light flared, revealing stone walls, shelves, and the low arch of the tunnel entrance. Lucian stared at it with obvious dislike. You neglected to mention it's built for children and foxes. You'll fit, she said. Barely. Crawl straight until you feel cold air, then push. The stream should still be clear. And if it's frozen solid? He asked. Then you punch through it, Reyna said. You keep telling me you're an alpha king. Prove it. To her surprise, he smiled. Bossy Omega, he said. Fine. Stay close. He squeezed into the tunnel, shoulders scraping the sides. Reyna followed, pulling the lantern after her. Behind them, the roar of the collapsing cottage grew muffled as earth swallowed the sound. The passage was worse than she remembered. Narrow, claustrophobic, packed with roots that clawed at her clothes and hair. Dirt crumbled under her palms. More than once, Lucian had to stop and brace himself, breathing hard as pain from his leg flared. Keep moving, she urged. The smoke will find its way down if we linger. At your command, he said dryly. By the time a tendril of icy air brushed her face, Reyna's arms trembled with exhaustion. Lucian grunted and pushed forward, and the packed earth ahead gave way in a shower of snow and fractured ice. Moonlight spilled through the opening. They spilled out onto the bank of the frozen stream in a tangle of limbs, gasping. Reyna rolled onto her back, staring up at the sky. Stars pricked through the thinning smoke. Behind the line of trees, her cottage burned, flames already beginning to collapse inward, sparks spiraling like broken prayers. Reyna's throat tightened. 6 years? She whispered. I built a life there. Lucian turned his head toward her. Ash streaked his face, fangs retreating, eyes still faintly luminous. "I know what it is to watch your home burn," he said. "To stand in the snow and smell the end of the only life you understood." She swallowed, anger and sorrow tangling. "And yet here we are. Again." "Yes," he said softly. "But not alone this time." For a long moment they lay there, listening to the crackle of distant fire and the quiet rush of the buried stream beneath them. Snowflakes drifted down, soft and indifferent. "What now?" she asked. "East," he said, pushing himself upright with a groan. "There's an old hunting lodge along this stream. It belongs to a Night Court ally. Safe enough to rest. Secure enough to call for retrieval." "Retrieval," she echoed. "Like broken cargo." He held out a hand to help her up. "Like a king who has to remind his court why he still wears the crown," he corrected. "And a which they'd be very stupid to underestimate." Reyna hesitated, staring back toward the orange glow on the ridge. Then she took his hand. "Fine," she said. "Let's go teach your court what happens when they play with fire and call Omega's toys." Lucian's smile was sharp and full of teeth. "Spoken like a queen," he murmured. She pretended not to hear that either. The trek to the lodge felt longer than any journey Reyna had taken in her life. Snow dragged at her boots, clinging to her skirts like cold hands. Lucian moved beside her with grim determination, jaw clenched, each step jarring his injured leg. He refused every offer of support beyond the occasional shoulder braced under his arm on the steeper inclines. "You're stubborn," Reyna said at one point, breath steaming in the air. "You know that? Alphas who aren't stubborn end up dead," he replied. "Or wearing someone else's collar." "Spoken like a man who's never worn one." His lips twitched. "You'd be surprised." She glanced at him sharply, but he said nothing more, attention turned toward the ridge ahead. A dark shape had emerged against the snow, a two-story structure of heavy timber and steep roofs, perched where the trees thinned enough to give a clear view of the valley below. "That's it," Lucian said. "The lodge." "Last time I was here, the cellars were full of illegal wine and the upstairs beds full of complaining mercenaries." "Sounds cozy," Reyna said dryly. By the time they reached the porch, her legs were shaking. Lucian lifted his hand to a blank section of wall beside the thick wooden door. There was a soft click she felt rather than heard, and the lock disengaged. "Biometric rune lock," he explained at her raised brow. "Keyed to my line. The man who owns this place swears by old wards and new tech." "Of course he does," she muttered. "Alpha kings and their toys." Inside, the lodge was dark and cold but intact. No signs of recent occupants. Dust lay undisturbed on the massive dining table, but the pantry yielded well-stocked shelves, preserved food, bottled water, crates of supplies. Someone was planning for a long winter. Lucian did a swift circuit of the main rooms, predator senses sweeping corners and shadows. When he returned, his shoulders had loosened a fraction. "Empty," he said. "For now. We have a few hours before I need to make contact." "We?" she echoed. "I don't remember becoming part of your court." "You're not," he said. "Yet. But you are part of this story now whether you like it or not. Better we decide how it's told." Reyna exhaled, letting her back rest against one of the support beams. The lodge felt bizarrely luxurious after her cottage. Leather chairs, thick rugs, a fireplace big enough to stand inside. Windows looked out over the valley like watchful eyes. "First I'm going to light that fire," she said. "Then I'm going to steal every bandage and antibiotic you court people have stashed here and remind your body it's not invincible." Lucian inclined his head. "You gave orders like an alpha. And you whined like an omega about the tunnel." She shot back. "Balance." He laughed, a low sound that warmed the cold air more than the flames would. Reyna turned away quickly, unnerved by the way it curled through her chest. They fell into motion again. She built the fire. He showed her the hidden panel disguised as a bookcase. Inside lay rows of weapons and a compact communications array: radio, satellite phone, a sleek rune-etched console connected to God's knew what networks. "Your Alpha King really doesn't trust anyone, does he?" she said. "Trust is expensive," Lucian replied. "Paranoia is cheaper than a coup. You're very cheerful for someone who just survived one." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he keyed in a sequence on the console, said a few words in a language she didn't recognize, harsh, old, full of consonants that scratched at her ears, and waited. When he spoke in a more familiar tongue, his voice had shifted into command mode, sharper somehow. "This is Valak. I'm alive. Lodge 43. Protocol Blackbird. Extract in 6 hours, weather permitting." The answering voice crackled through the speaker, full of barely restrained shock. "Alpha King? We thought," they said. They were wrong. Lucian cut in. "You have 6 hours to prove the Night Court can still move when its throne is shaken. Do not bring a crowd. Do not bring anyone who has ever spoken Elias's name with admiration. Understood?" "Yes, my king," the voice said. He disconnected and turned back to her. Some of the steel left his spine now that orders were given. 6 hours? Reyna said. "Enough time for you to tear open those stitches again if you don't sit down." "Yes, healer," he muttered. "Good. You're learning." She raided the lodge's medical cabinet, far more extensive than any village clinic, then ushered him onto the rug near the fire. When she peeled away his shirt, she paused despite herself. His chest and arms were a map of violence. Old claw marks, bullet scars, burns shaped like ritual sigils. A long line carved diagonal across his ribs looked dangerously close to where a heart should be. "Your court's idea of loyalty training?" she asked, voice softer than she intended. "Some of it," he said. "Some of it is older. Some of it is my own damn pride. Alpha Kings don't retreat. We survive. We avenge. We pretend the wounds don't matter." "And do they?" she asked, touch gentle as she cleaned the fresh cuts. His gaze flicked to hers, unreadable. "Less than they used to," he admitted. "More than I let them see." She stitched him again, this time with better tools and better light, and tried not to think about the strange, fragile thing growing in the space between them, something neither crown nor coven could control. Once the worst of the blood was cleaned and stitched, Reyna wrapped Lucian's shoulder in fresh bandages, then tapped his leg. "Boot off," she ordered. "I need to see how bad the break is after all that heroic nonsense." "If you call it heroic, I might let you set it," he said. "I'll call it stupid with good aim," she corrected. He hissed as she eased the boot away, revealing a swelling bruise and the improvised splint she'd cobbled together in the cottage. The bone was still aligned, but the skin around the break was angry, inflamed. "You pushed it too hard," she said. "We were busy not dying. And now we're busy making sure that keeps being an option." She shot back. "Hold still." She wrapped the leg more securely, muttering to herself as she worked, half in the village tongue and half in the older words her grandmother had whispered over wounds and warming bruise. Lucian watched her with those silver eyes, head tilted slightly. "That language," he said. "The old hill speech. Most witches let it die. Most witches didn't have a grandmother too stubborn to stop talking," Reyna said. "Or a mother who used it to swear at council men behind their backs." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Your family sounds difficult." "My family is dead," she corrected, voice tightening. "Burned by villagers who wanted someone to blame when their children died despite every remedy we brewed. They called us cursed. Said the Petrescu women belonged to the old ways, to Alpha Kings and vampire courts." Lucian's expression sobered. "And now one of those kings sits in your lodge, bleeding on your rug. Life is very good at cruel jokes," she said. "Hold this." She set his hands to keep pressure on the bandage while she rummaged through her herb pouch, the one thing she'd grabbed on instinct as the cottage burned. Miraculously, the leather had survived the smoke. She poured a selection of dried leaves and crushed roots into a small bowl, sniffing, adjusting proportions by memory. You brew like an Omega witch, Lucian observed. You bleed like a reckless alpha, she replied. Our roles are clear. You hate that word, he said. Omega. I hate the way it's used, she corrected. Like a cage disguised as a kiss. Like a leash disguised as protection. He was quiet for a moment, ash and firelight painting his features in strange shadows. Ask me what it means in my court, he said finally. She glanced up, wary. What does it mean in your court, Alpha King? It means anchor, he said. The one who can pull an alpha back from the edge. The one who hears the threads of blood and magic when the rest of us just hear shouting. It means council seat. Last word. Bond that steadies the crown when it wants to turn into a blade. Reyna snorted softly. Pretty words. They weren't always true, he admitted. In my father's time, Omegas were trophies. But I killed my father's ideals along with his enemies. I rebuilt the Night Court so that those with softer power don't have to sharpen themselves into weapons just to be heard. Sounds like you almost did something right, she said, pouring hot water from the kettle over the herbs. The bitter, earthy scent of pain tea rose in a curl of steam. Shame your loyal subjects tried to cut your head off anyway. Ambition doesn't care about reforms, he said. Some alphas don't like the idea that the king might listen to someone they can't bully. You almost sound like you want an Omega, she said lightly, blowing across the surface of the brew. A nice, compliant court anchor who will pat your scars and make soothing noises while you rearrange empires. His gaze sharpened. No, he said slowly. If I ever bond, she'll be someone who stands at my side and tells me when I'm being a fool. Someone whose power doesn't need my crown to define it. Someone who would have opened that door in a storm even if she knew death waited on the threshold. Heat gripped the back of her neck that had nothing to do with the fire. She thrust the mug at him more abruptly than necessary. Drink, she said. You're not seducing anyone with broken bones and half-frozen hair. He chuckled and obeyed. The tea made his face twist in mild disgust, which pleased her more than it should have. Bitter, he said. Truth usually is. They sat in silence for a time, listening to the wind batter the lodge's thick walls. Outside, night had deepened fully, the snow glow and stars combining into a strange, pearly light. Inside, the flames painted warm halos on wood and stone, turning the hunting trophies and old beams into witnesses. Your research, Lucian said eventually. The work you lost. The court has coffers deeper than most kingdoms. Endowments. Shadow foundations. If you wanted to rebuild, properly, I could ensure you never worry about coin again. Reyna's instinct was to refuse immediately. To snap that she wouldn't be bought, that her work would not be stamped with a king's seal. Then she thought of the journals turned to ash, the lost recipes, the elders who had died with knowledge in their tongues and no one to remember. What would you want in return? She asked. He shrugged one shoulder carefully. Reports. Results. Occasional use of your remedies for my people instead of their going to back alley leeches. And perhaps, the occasional conversation that isn't about territories and treaties. So a patron, she said. Not a jailer. If I tried to cage you, you'd set my throne on fire, he said. I may be arrogant, but I'm not stupid. She smiled despite herself. You are absolutely stupid. But you're not wrong about that. The hours crawled by, stretched thin by exhaustion and the strange quiet that follows catastrophe. At some point, Reyna found herself dozing in one of the leather chairs, head tilted back, the crackle of the fire and Lucian's slow breathing turning into a kind of lullaby she hadn't realized she'd missed. When she woke, it was to the low thrum of distant rotors. Adrenaline snapped her fully upright. Lucian was already on his feet, too fast for someone with a broken leg, one hand braced on the back of his chair, eyes turned toward the windows. Extraction? Reyna asked, heart tripping. Or opportunists who intercepted our signal, he said. Either way, weapons. He tossed her a compact handgun from the hidden cache. It felt wrong in her grip, all cold precision and explosive potential, but she checked the chamber with the clumsy familiarity of someone who knew enough to be dangerous. If this goes badly, Lucian said, stay behind me. Night court or not, they'll think twice before shooting through their king to reach you. Depends how much they want your crown, she muttered, moving to the side of the window to peer out. A dark shape swooped low over the valley, snow swirling in its wake. The helicopter circled once, then descended toward the small clearing below the lodge. Bright beams of light cut through the night, sweeping the trees. Reyna threw an arm over her eyes as one of them swung too close. Subtle, she said. Do all Alpha Kings announce their survival with flying lanterns? Lucian's lips twitched. Those are my most paranoid people. They'd have come underground if they could have. 3 figures emerged from the helicopter as the rotors slowed, 2 broad-shouldered, moving like soldiers, 1 taller, wrapped in a long coat that flapped in the downdraft. Even from the window, Reyna could feel the weight of their presence, old power, sharpened purpose. Friends? She asked. Loyal until proven otherwise, Lucian said. One of them has known me since I had more scars on my pride than my body. That does not reassure me as much as you think it does. He glanced at her, something softer in his eyes now. Stay close, Reyna. If anything feels wrong, we leave. We don't negotiate. She repeated, tasting the word. They stepped out onto the porch as the trio approached. The wind cut through her clothes, carrying the scent of fuel, snow, and vampire, sharp metal, old stone, the faint tang of blood. Alpha King, the tall figure in the coat said, stopping a few meters away. His hair was steel gray, his eyes a darker silver than Lucian's. You look terrible. Good. I'd have worried if you walked out of that valley untouched. Commander Dorn, Lucian said, something like genuine relief threaded through the title. I see you've survived the coup attempts in my absence. They were amateur hour, Dorn snorted. Your traitors had more ego than strategy. Though I admit, I wasn't pleased to hear you'd gone off into the mountains without telling anyone. If I'd told you, you would have insisted on coming, Lucian said. Then we'd both have been targets. And the witch? One of the soldiers asked, gaze flicking to Reyna with poorly concealed curiosity. We heard rumors. A mountain Omega. Silverblood healer. Reyna stiffened at the word Omega on his tongue. Dorn's gaze sharpened. Mind your tone, Cade, he said. This witch took in our king when the court failed him. You owe her more respect than half the elders sitting warm in their towers. Lucian's mouth twitched. Dorn, this is Reyna Petrescu. Healer. Researcher. Woman who shot Elias in the shoulder and threw a knife through his wrist. All 3 Night Court men looked at her differently after that. Elias is dead, then, Dorn said, satisfaction evident. Good. One less viper in the nest. I snapped his neck myself, Lucian said. Make sure the court hears it from you first. I don't want rumors growing teeth. Dorn nodded once. It will be done, my king. The title sat heavy in the air. For the first time, Reyna saw Lucian not as the wounded stranger on her threshold, not as the predator in her cottage, but as what he truly was, a center of gravity these others orbited. An Alpha King whose choices would ripple across cities and shadowed halls. And what of you, witch? Dorn asked, turning to her. Will you come to the city? The Night Court could use a healer who isn't afraid to tell our king when he's being an idiot. She's already auditioned for the role, Lucian said dryly. Reyna folded her arms against the cold. I haven't decided anything beyond the next few hours, she said. My cottage burned because I opened my door. My past is ash. My future is smoky. Dorn studied her, then inclined his head in a gesture that felt oddly respectful. Fair. But know this. Anyone who shelters an Alpha King becomes part of the story, whether they like it or not. Better to choose your chapter than let others write it. Everyone keeps telling me that, she muttered. Lucian stepped closer, his warmth a barrier against the wind. I meant what I said before, he told her softly. I can get you out of Romania entirely. New name. New roof. Far from courts and crowns. Or you can come with me. Walk into the night court at my side and see whether the stories about monsters are true. And if I do neither? She asked. If I take your resources and build my research somewhere quiet, but refuse to be a court omega or a king's shadow? His eyes held hers. Then I'll send you books and coin and subjects to treat from a distance, he said. And I'll be very annoyed. But I'll respect it. The honesty in that made something a knot in her chest. You're really bad at being a manipulative tyrant, she said. Thank you, he replied gravely. Behind them, the helicopter's rotors began to spin up again, impatient. Choose, Reina, Dorn said. The longer we sit here, the more eyes turn to this ridge. Snow swirled around her boots. Somewhere far behind them, the ridge where her cottage had stood was a dark smear against the white horizon. Reina closed her eyes and saw shelves of books, jars of herbs, a life built on solitude and survival. Then she saw Lucian bleeding on her floor, snarling in the snow, laughing in her kitchen, offering her not chains, but choices. When she opened her eyes, the answer was clear enough to make her both afraid and alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. I'll come, she said. For now. On my terms. With my work untouched by your court politics. Lucian's exhale fogged between them. For a heartbeat, relief and something deeper flashed across his face. On your terms, he agreed. Always, Omega. She didn't correct him this time. The helicopter lifted into the sky with a deep, pulsing roar, pushing snow outward in spirals. Reina sat beside Lucian, strapped into a seat that felt far too flimsy for the weight of everything that had happened. The cabin lights flickered low, painting all of them in washed-out gold. Dorn and his 2 soldiers sat opposite them, alert even in stillness. Lucian leaned his head back against the padded wall, exhaustion carving deep shadows under his silver eyes. Yet he watched Reina more than he slept. You don't have to look at me like I'm a ticking potion bottle, she muttered. You opened your door to a dying king, he said. I'm allowed to be curious. Curious, she echoed. That's what you call it. He didn't deny it. Outside, the mountains fell away, jagged and infinite. Reina felt the moment her world detached from the ridge she'd lived on for 6 years. A strange grief tugged at her chest, light, but persistent. Once we reach the capital, Dorn said loudly over the rotors, we'll land straight in the central courtyard. The elders have been notified of your survival. Some are relieved. Some are less so. Lucian's expression sharpened. Let them gather. I intend to address the court myself before rumors twist tonight into a myth. Reina folded her arms. And what exactly do I do while you threaten nobles and glare at elders? You stay near Dorn, Lucian said. No one will dare approach you without his permission, Dorn grunted. Or yours, my king. Reina raised a brow. You two talk about me like I'm not sitting right here. Lucian's lips twitched. We're adjusting to having you here. It's new. Omegas who stand up to court traitors are rare. Omegas who shoot court traitors, Dorn corrected. First in my memory. Reina looked away out the window, heat crawling up her neck. Maybe if alphas behaved better, Omegas wouldn't need to shoot anyone. The soldiers attempted, and failed, to hide their amusement. Lucian angled toward her, voice low enough only she could hear. Your fire doesn't need a crown to be seen, Reina. And your arrogance doesn't need encouragement. She shot back. But she didn't miss the warmth in his gaze, nor the faint softening of his jaw. She didn't acknowledge it. Not yet. The helicopter cut through a pocket of clouds, and suddenly the night court city stretched below. Vast, shadowed, lit by thousands of cold white lights. Spires. Bridges. High stone walls glowing with runes. Reina's breath caught. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And she was flying straight into the heart of it. Lucian leaned closer, voice a whisper against the hum of the engines. Welcome to my world, Reina Petrescu. Try not to set it on fire. She didn't answer. She wasn't sure she could promise that. The landing deck of the Night Court fortress glowed in blue-white light. Guards in black armor ringed the perimeter, bows and rifles lowered only when Lucian stepped out of the helicopter, grim and bloodstained but undeniably alive. A wave rippled through them, shock first, then fierce loyalty. My king! Several guards shouted, pounding fists to their chests. Reina stepped out behind him, squinting at the sudden brightness. Whispers rose immediately. Is that the Mountain Omega? She survived the attack? She looks ordinary. She doesn't smell ordinary. She can hear you, Reina snapped without turning her head. The whispers stopped. Lucian hid a smirk. Dorn motioned her forward. Stay close. No one here will touch you, but they'll be staring. Omegas rarely enter the fortress unless... He stopped himself. Unless what? She asked. Unless they're bonded to a high-ranking alpha, he said carefully. Or unless they're here to accept a formal role. Reina's stomach tightened. And which one do they think I am? All of them, Dorn admitted. Lucian raised a hand, silencing the courtyard. Prepare the Hall of Echoes, he ordered. Every elder, every general, every surviving lieutenant. Tonight the court learns the truth. A guard sprinted off. Reina exhaled slowly. You're really going straight for the throne room covered in blood? Yes, he said simply. They need to see what their king survived. And me? She asked. What do I do while you give speeches and glare everyone into submission? Lucian turned to her fully. You walk beside me. Her heart stumbled in her chest. Beside? Not behind, he added, voice low. You are not a servant. You are not a prize. You are the witch who saved the king they tried to kill. Let them see you for what you are. And what's that? She whispered. A force the court will regret underestimating. She didn't have a response for that, not one that didn't reveal how the words struck something deep. The fortress corridors swallowed them. Arched ceilings, torch brackets glowing with blue fire, murals depicting rivers of shadow and moonlight. The night court was colder than the mountain ridge, but it hummed with power that raised the hair along her arms. As they approached the Hall of Echoes, a pair of massive doors carved with ancient symbols began to open from within. Reina braced herself. Lucian stood taller, broken bones forgotten, wounds ignored, becoming once more the king his enemies had hoped to bury. Stay close, he murmured. They stepped into the firelit hall together. The Hall of Echoes was enormous, stone pillars rising into darkness, braziers burning with pale flame, shadows pooling like ink around carved reliefs of past rulers. And waiting inside were the elders. Dozens of them. Clad in dark velvet, embroidered coats, ceremonial armor. Their eyes, silver, gold, red, glinted as Lucian strode through the center aisle, Reina beside him like a blade hidden in plain sight. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Impossible! He survived. Who is the Omega? That must be her, the witch from the ridge. Lucian stopped at the base of the throne platform. He didn't sit. Instead, he faced them all, unflinching. Elias Valker led a coup against the Night Court, he announced. He allied with hunters. He attacked me on the northern pass. He murdered loyal guards. He betrayed everything this court stands for. Anger flared through the hall like a struck nerve. Several elders hissed. One cursed under his breath. A narrow-faced councilwoman stepped forward. Where is he now, my king? Lucian's voice dropped into something cold and lethal. Dead. By my hand? Silence. Reina felt the weight of the moment settle into her bones. Lucian gestured toward her. This woman, Reina Petrescu, is the reason I am standing here. She sheltered me when assassins hunted me. She fought alongside me. She killed one of Elias's men with her own hand. Without her, your king would be ash in the snow. Every eye turned to her. Reyna did not flinch. An elder in layered robes sniffed the air. She's Omega. Another spat. She's human-born. A third said, she smells of the old hill magic. Reyna stepped forward before Lucian could speak, fire prickling through her blood. I'm not here to join your court, she said, voice echoing across stone. I'm not here to kneel to elders who burn villages when they're frightened. I'm not here to be claimed, collared, or used as a symbol. A ripple of shock surged through the hall. Dorn hid a smile. Reyna lifted her chin. I'm here because your king would have died without me, and because I'm not done being angry about the fact that hunters were allowed to breach your lands in the first place. Several elders sputtered. One looked personally offended. Lucian's silver eyes shone with something she didn't have the courage to name. She speaks truth, he said. Our borders fail. Our alliances crumble. Omegas are not respected. Witches are driven into hiding. And while the court bickers, hunters walk freely through our mountains. Reyna felt the hall shift, power gathering, loyalties recalibrating. Lucian stepped beside her, his voice lowering but carrying to every distant shadow. Reyna Petrescu will be offered protection, resources, research funding, and the right to walk this court as an equal, if she chooses. Whispers erupted, scandalized. She hasn't accepted anything yet, Lucian warned. Reyna stared at him. He stared right back. And she realized he was giving her power before she had even asked for it. A dangerous gesture. A vulnerable one. And the court knew it. The question now was what she would do with it. The hall buzzed with layered emotion, outrage, curiosity, grudging respect. Elders whispered behind sleeves. Generals exchanged wary glances. Reyna felt the weight of 100 powerful eyes on her. For the first time in years, she didn't shrink. Lucian spoke again, voice steady. I will rebuild this court stronger than before. But I can't do it with silenced voices. That ends now. An elder scowled. And the witch? Will she stay? Reyna inhaled slowly, feeling a thread of her grandmother's strength wind through her chest. I haven't decided, she said. I lost my home, my work, my past. I need time. The hall seemed to hold its breath. But, she added, I'll accept the court's protection while I rebuild my research. And if your king fails to deliver on what he promises, she glanced deliberately at Lucian, I'll happily set your archives on fire and start my own kingdom in the mountains. Several guards choked on laughter. Even Dorn looked impressed. Lucian's eyes warmed. You'd make a terrifying queen. Unlikely, she said. I prefer books to crowns. Crowns can be heavy, he said. Books can change worlds. Their eyes held for a beat too long. A younger elder cleared his throat sharply. King Lucian, the council demands to know, what role will she hold? Advisor? Healer? Omega representative? Reyna blinked. Omega representative? Lucian looked thoughtful. It has been empty for years. The hall stirred with surprise. No, Reyna said quickly. I can't represent Omegas. I've been in the mountains alone for 6 years. And yet, Lucian replied gently, you speak for them better than most elders in this hall. She opened her mouth to refuse again. But a memory surfaced. The villagers spitting on her doorstep. Her mother's clinic burning. The Omegas who never had a voice in any court. Maybe she couldn't fix the world. But she could change something. Temporary, she said finally. I'll hold it temporarily. Until someone better steps forward. Lucian bowed his head, something like pride flickering across his face. Then the court has its first Omega representative in 3 decades. Shock. Approval. Suspicion. All swirling through the hall. Reyna felt none of it. Just exhaustion. And a strange, steadying warmth when Lucian placed a hand on her shoulder, careful, respectful, but grounding. Come, he murmured. The court has enough to whisper about for one night. As they walked out of the Hall of Echoes, side by side again, Reyna leaned slightly toward him, not enough to be obvious. Just enough to remind herself she was still here. Still alive. And maybe no longer alone. The fortress tower room assigned to her overlooked the entire valley, cold moonlight spreading across rooftops, bridges, and shadowed walkways. Reyna stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself, letting the wind cool her thoughts. A soft knock sounded. Lucian leaned in the doorway, wrapped in a dark cloak, exhaustion polluting even his regal posture. But his gaze softened when it landed on her. "You handled the court better than most generals," he said. "I handled it because I didn't know enough to be afraid," she replied. "Maybe fear is overrated. Maybe kings shouldn't nearly die in the snow," she countered. He stepped closer, stopping just within arm's reach. "Reyna, I don't know what role you'll want here. Or if you'll stay. But whatever you choose, know this, the ridge wasn't the end of your life. It was the beginning of another." She held his gaze. Steady. Unflinching. "Then give me time," she said quietly. "As long as you need." A gust of cold air swept through the room. She shivered, and Lucian, without thinking, slipped off his cloak and draped it around her shoulders. "Rest," he said. "You carried more weight than any Omega should have had to." "I'm not your Omega," she reminded him. "No," he said softly. "Not yet." She didn't answer. He didn't push. Lucian bowed his head slightly, then turned to leave. At the threshold, he paused. "And Reyna?" he added gently. "Yes? Thank you for opening your door." She smiled, small, tired, but real. "Thank you for knocking." He left her to the quiet moonlight, and for the first time in years, Reyna Petrescu felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. A life bigger than the mountains. A future she hadn't expected to survive long enough to see. And maybe, far down the line, a king who wasn't quite as terrible as legends claimed. Thank you for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment what your favorite part of this story was.